Welcome to the All Pro Football Data Show. My name is Jim Coburn, and as you can clearly see, I have some fresh new stuff in terms of the header. All Pro Football Data. This picture, if you will, was generated by Jake Anderson on ChatGPT. I think it's a pretty decent looking picture. I think I'm going to take it and roll with it. But to get into the actual episode, we're going to be looking at Malik Nabers, wide receiver at LSU, in terms of his production profile. Yes, we're going to look at wide receivers. I know you guys probably are tired of me talking about quarterbacks, or at least we're going to have a lot of quarterbacks and a lot of running backs and other stuff like that. But Nabers, just a fun fact, is the all-time receiving yards leader at LSU. With all that stuff out of the way, let's get into his actual data profile. So first off, let's talk about offensive market share scores. So offensive market share scores, for those that are new to the channel and don't really know a lot of the stuff that I do, is you take a raw statistic gathered from a school website or college football reference. The raw statistics are transformed into a market share score by taking an individual statistic and dividing it by the team total. So essentially, if a wide receiver had 10 touchdowns and his team had, say, 100 touchdowns, then he had 10% market share. It's very unlikely that a team would have 100 touchdowns, but that's just as an easy way to explain that. This transformed statistic is then ranked against positional peers to get a percentile score, and that score is weighted against the age score of a prospect to give you the offensive market share score. Now, looking at his score, and the data set I used for this was out of 3,710 wide receivers since the 1969 NFL draft class. Nabers had a 92 percentile total offensive market share production score. He had a 92.49 the passing yardage or receiving yardage market share score is MSY. Total offensive market share is MSTY, which was 92 percentile. And then his touchdown market share score was 76.44 out of 100, if you will. So the first one is just how he did in terms of his receiving offense. The second one deals with how he did in terms of his team. A lot of times the team-based score will tell you whether he was in a run-heavy offense or a pass-heavy offense. That kind of what that number kind of shows you. But in terms of Nabers' production, he tested pretty well. Hit all the sort of areas you're looking for in terms of all-pro potential, in terms of near the averages, hit the Pro Bowl areas. The starter areas, of course, was easy to get above the starter areas because you just need to be an average wide receiver in college to be a starting wide receiver in the NFL. But he hit all the numbers that you're looking for at that particular position. Now, looking at wide receiver efficiency scores, same thing. Raw statistics gathered from school website or college football reference. You take those scores, you rank them against positional peers to get a percentile score, and that score is weighted against the age score of a prospect. Touchdown percentage is the number of touches divided by total touchdowns, just to kind of show you how that metric is done. And that gives you the offensive efficiency score. So this tells you how efficient they were. So let's say a wide receiver didn't have a high market share score, but they had great efficiency. You know, every time they got the football, a touchdown happened. Every time they got a football, they averaged a decent per touch rate. You're going to have wide receivers that are like that, guys, and sometimes those guys break out. Not as much as the guys who have the great market share data, though, but it is something to take a look at and kind of think about when you're evaluating these prospects in terms of that. And on top of that, you might have a prospect that scored really well in terms of his production, but he had a very poor efficiency score. Maybe he was overutilized. Maybe he wasn't as good as his production says because he was actually kind of inefficient with the football in his hands. That's another thing you have to look at as well in terms of these numbers. So that's kind of what the wide receiver efficiency score is it kind of gives you an idea of how efficient they were with the football. And in terms of Malik Nabers, nothing to worry about here. Malik Nabers was extremely efficient. He was in the 80th percentile in terms of his touchdown percentage score, and his RAV or reception or yards per reception was near the 90-plus percentile area. When you look at the Pro Bowl average, All-Pro average, and starter average, he pretty much hits all the averages that you're looking for in terms of that particular position. So, moving forward. Adjusted production scores. The age of a prospect is scored from youngest to oldest on the day they are drafted. Then the age score is added to offensive market share, strength of schedule score, and SRS, which is strength of team score. These scores are then ranked to get the MSA or market share strength of schedule, strength of team, and age score, which gives you the MSA. And then the PASS score takes all the market share scores, all the efficiency scores, the age score, the strength of team, and the strength of schedule score, adds them all together to give you an adjusted production score. What this information does is it gives you context. How productive was he for his age? How productive was he for the team that he was on? How productive was he for the level of competition that he was playing? That's what adjusted production scores do. It is by far one of the most powerful metrics to look at when it comes to wide receivers. Looking at Malik Nabers, hit it out of the park, man. In terms of 90th percentile in his age score, MSA score, and pass score. And if you look at the All-Pro averages, the Pro Bowl averages, the starter averages, everything you can look at, he hits well in line with those guys. So great overall profile from that kind of perspective for him from Nabers in terms of having All-Pro and Pro Bowl level potential. Here are some of the comparisons for him. So when I looked at his pro comparisons based on his market share data, his age, MSA, and pass scores, he pretty much hits between these types of guys. Michael Jenkins, Chris Godwin, Kenny Britt, Julio Jones, Alshon Jeffrey, Monty Toomer, Allen Robinson. I would say just based on his style, he's more so with Godwin and Toomer than he is with a guy like Julio Jones and Kenny Britt and those types of guys. I think his style fits more so with those types of players, if you will, because he's not exactly 6'3", 6'5", and he may test like Julio Jones. I might be surprised. He might test like him, but that's kind of what he looks like in terms of his overall pro comparisons based on those key points in his data set. Now, moving on to the outlook. Malik Nabers profiles as a starter to all-pro level wide receiver in the mold of a Chris Godwin or a Monty Toomer. The athleticism testing will be huge for Nabers, who could drop in his projection based on these factors, because there's a lot of wide receivers that are really close in this particular draft class. So if he tests not so well, Marvin Harrison Jr. could get above Malik Nabers. There's a lot of wide receivers that tested really well in this particular draft class. So I think athleticism is going to be a big factor to kind of decide who's number one, who's number two, who's number three. Next up. However, I would consider this, regardless of the athletic testing, I still think Nabers should be considered a top 5 wide receiver in the 2024 NFL draft class based on his production profile. So, if Nabers goes to the combine and puts up average numbers, I still think that he should be considered a top 5 wide receiver in this draft class. It will kind of dampen the sort of enthusiasm of taking him number 1 in terms of not really number 1 overall, but just for him to be the first wide receiver off the board. I think it kind of dampens those expectations. But I still think that if Nabers doesn't test extremely well, I still think you have to take him. With his production profile and everything else like that, it's fantastic, and I think he definitely needs to be in discussion for the top 5 wide receivers in this particular draft class. With all that stuff out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching the channel. My name is Jim Coburn. You can check out my other work at Geometrics on Twitter. That's at JIMETRICS. You can also check me out at my Patreon page, patreon.com/jcoburn, which is JCOBERN. And with all that stuff out of the way, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace!